Hey everyone, welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be tackling a pretty big topic, AI and data protection. Specifically, you know, how can companies use all this powerful AI stuff responsibly while still respecting individual rights? I mean, it's a question on everyone's mind these days, right?
It really is. And there's this report from the Information Accountability Foundation. They call it Assessments for an AI World. It might sound a little dry, but trust me, it's packed with insights.
Oh, yeah. It's actually way more interesting than the title might suggest. So one of the things that really jumped out at me was how companies are justifying using our data for AI these days. It's not as simple as just getting our consent anymore. This concept of legitimate interest is becoming a really big deal.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The traditional methods like getting consent or relying on contracts, they just don't really cut it for these complex AI applications we're seeing.
Right? Like, imagine trying to get consent from every single person whose data was used to train a model like ChatGPT. It would be impossible. And contracts. It's like, how do you even write a contract for something that's constantly evolving like AI is?
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
just not practical. So that's where this idea of legitimate interest comes in. It's about companies demonstrating a genuine need for the data, showing how using it will actually benefit people. And of course, making sure they're respecting individual rights along the way.
Okay, so it's a balancing act. It's not a free pass for companies to just do whatever they want with our data, right? They can't just slap a legitimate interest label on it and
Yeah.
call it a day.
No, absolutely not. It's not that simple. The IAF actually talks about this multidimensional balancing approach. They're saying we need to think beyond just data protection rights. We need to consider other things too, like safety, economic opportunities, and even how AI could benefit society as a whole.
Wow, okay. So it's bigger than just protecting my personal information. It's about the impact AI has on everyone. This is getting really interesting. It's like, how do we make sure AI is used ethically, not just legally?
That's a great point. And the IAF is really trying to bridge that gap. They want to make sure AI is developed responsibly. And to help companies actually do that, they created this practical tool. It's a step-by-step guide. They call it the Draft Model Legitimate Interest Assessment, or Draft Model LIA for short.
Okay, so it's like a roadmap for ethical AI. I like it. But can we get a real-world example? How would this assessment actually work in practice?
Sure. The report actually uses a really interesting example, web scraping for AI training. Let's say there's a company that wants to develop an AI system that can diagnose diseases more accurately, right? To train that system, they might need to scrape medical information from websites, public websites.
Okay, yeah, I see where this is going. On the one hand, you've got this AI that could potentially save lives by catching diseases early. But on the other hand, you've got all this medical information that people might have shared online without ever imagining it would be used to train AI. It makes you think, are the benefits worth the potential privacy risks?
Exactly. That's the question, isn't it? And the IAF's framework is designed to address that head-on. The draft model LIA would require that company to really assess those risks. Think about the likelihood of privacy invasion, how it might impact individuals, and then what can they do to minimize those risks.
So they can't just have good intentions. They have to actually prove that they've thought through the ethical implications, weighed the benefits against the risks, and taken steps to protect people's privacy.
Exactly. And this is where things get really interesting. To make this assessment more objective, the IAF even suggests using a scoring system. So they actually weigh the benefits and risks.
Okay, now that's what I'm talking about. A scoring system, it makes the whole thing more accountable, more transparent.
Right. It's not just about vague promises. Companies have to provide evidence to support their claims.
So no more, trust us, this AI will be great for society. They have to show their work, so to speak.
Exactly. And that kind of transparency, that's how you build trust, not just with regulators, but with the public too.
I mean, think about it. If some company's asking me to trust their AI with my data, I want to know they've thought about the ethical implications, right? I want to know they're not just chasing profits.
Absolutely. And that's exactly the kind of critical thinking the IAF is trying to encourage. They want companies to ask themselves, should we be doing this? And if so, how can we do it responsibly?
Which brings us to the core of the issue. What does it actually mean to use AI responsibly? What steps can companies take to make sure they're innovating ethically?
Well, that's what we'll be exploring in the next part of our deep dive. We'll take a closer look at the IAF's framework, see how it applies to different AI applications, and uncover some of the challenges that come up along the way.
Sounds good. So if you're ready to go even deeper into this world of AI and ethics, stick around.
One thing that really struck me about this report is how it kind of pushes us to think beyond just individual rights when we're talking about AI.
Oh, really? Like, what else is there to consider? Isn't protecting my personal data like the main thing?
Oh, yeah, for sure. That's a huge part of it. But the report goes into this idea of multidimensional balancing. It's like a zoom out, look at the bigger picture. AI can impact way more than just one person. It can have these ripple effects, on groups of people, even society as a whole.
Okay, yeah. So it's not just about me and my data. It's about understanding the potential consequences for everyone. Like, could AI be used to discriminate against certain groups?
Yeah.
Or like make existing inequalities even worse?
Exactly. You got it.
Okay.
That's what makes the IAF's framework so valuable, I think. It encourages companies to really ask those tough questions, to think about the potential downsides, not just the shiny, happy benefits. Like they specifically talk about how AI could impact freedom of expression, even safety.
Yeah. It's starting to feel like one of those sci-fi movies where the AI takes over and starts making all the decisions, usually with pretty disastrous results.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's a good analogy. The IAF is basically saying, hey, let's not let that happen. Let's get ahead of this thing, figure out the potential pitfalls, and put some safeguards in place from the very beginning. And this draft model, LIA, this tool they created, it's their way of giving companies a way to actually do that.
And I love how the report gets into the specifics. They give these detailed examples of how the assessment would work in different situations. Like they even break down how you'd evaluate the risks and benefits of something like facial recognition technology, which is huge these days.
Oh, absolutely. Facial recognition is the perfect example, right? Because it's such a sensitive area. It could be used for good, but it also has the potential for a lot of harm. The IAF's framework would force companies to really examine their motives, make sure they're using the technology responsibly, respecting privacy, and doing everything they can to minimize harm.
So, okay, but how do they weigh the potential benefits? Like if a company says their AI will improve national security or prevent crime, does that automatically give them a free pass to use our data in ways that might seem kind of intrusive?
Well, that's where that scoring system we talked about comes in. Remember, it's not just about opinions or gut feelings. It's about making those benefits measurable. Like companies need to actually quantify the benefits, show the evidence, and then weigh those benefits against the potential risks in a systematic way.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better. But realistically, how many companies are going to go through this whole assessment process?
Yeah.
Isn't it kind of a pipe dream to think everyone will just jump on board?
I think that's a valid concern, and the IAF seems to understand that too. It's not about creating a ton of bureaucracy or stifling innovation. It's about encouraging a culture of responsibility,
Right.
getting companies to really think critically about the ethical implications of what they're doing with AI.
So it's more about a change in mindset then, creating a culture of accountability.
Yeah, exactly. And the report actually goes beyond just the assessment itself. It talks about transparency, about involving all the stakeholders, the people who might be impacted. And it emphasizes the importance of having clear processes for addressing complaints or concerns. It's about building trust, not just with regulators, but with the public as a whole.
Yeah, that makes sense. If people feel like they're being heard, like their rights are being respected, they're going to be a lot more likely to embrace AI and all its potential, right?
Totally. And that's what we all want, right? A
Yeah.
future where AI is a force for good in the world, something that helps us, not something that hurts us.
Well said. It really does feel like we're at this crossroads. We have this incredible technology with so much potential, but we need to be smart about how we use it. We need to understand its impact on individuals and on society as a whole. And I think this report gives us a way forward, like a map to get it right.
I agree with you. The IAF report is a really valuable contribution to the whole conversation around AI ethics. It gives us a framework, a set of tools we can use to navigate this new world and make sure AI is aligned with our values.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So for everyone listening, if you're thinking, wow, this is a lot to take in, I hear you. It is. But stick with us for the final part of our deep dive. We're going to get into the nuts and bolts of how companies can actually put this framework into action.
We're going to look at some more specific examples, some practical strategies, and even some of the challenges companies might face as they try to do this right. It's about making all these complex ideas, making them actionable.
So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back to explore the real-world implications of responsible AI. Okay, so we've talked about this legitimate interest framework, but how do companies actually use it? Like, how do they put it into practice? Thankfully, the IAF report gives us some real steps to follow. They even walk through a sample assessment using that web scraping example we've been talking about.
Yeah, that medical diagnosis AI, it's a really good case study.
All right, so let's pretend we're the company developing that AI.
Yeah.
We want to use web scraping to collect medical information, train our system to get better at diagnosing diseases. So where do we start?
Well, the first thing is you got to clearly define your legitimate interest, right? In this case, it might be something like improving healthcare outcomes or advancing medical research, something like that.
Okay, yeah, we got to be specific, right? No more hiding behind these vague ideas of innovation.
Right, exactly. It has to be genuine. You need to articulate the real need for the data. And then you have to think about what data you're actually going to use, which can be tricky with web scraping. You're collecting data that people might have posted online without ever thinking it could be used for AI training.
Yeah, exactly. That's a big concern.
So the IAF really stresses transparency and data minimization. You have to be upfront about what you're collecting, how you're using it, and why, and you only take what's absolutely necessary, nothing more.
Okay, so no more data hoarding just in case. Got it. But even if you're transparent and minimize data collection, you still have to deal with the potential risks to people, right?
Absolutely, yeah. That's where the balancing act comes in. You weigh the potential benefits of your AI against those potential risks to individuals. And remember that scoring system we discussed. That can help make the assessment more uh, objective.
Okay, so let's break it down. How would the scoring system actually work in this case?
Well, you assign scores to both the benefits and the risks. The scores are based on how likely they are to happen and how big of an impact they could have. So, for benefits, improving the accuracy of medical diagnoses, that's probably going to get a high score. I mean, that's the whole point of the AI, right?
Makes sense. But what about the risks? What are we talking about there?
Privacy invasion would be a big one in this case, right? People might not be okay with their medical info, even if it's public online, being used to train an AI. So you really have to think about how likely that risk is and how big of an impact it could have.
Yeah, I can see that. Especially if the data is really sensitive or could be used to identify someone, like a data breach could be a huge problem.
Definitely. That risk would probably get a high score too. And then you have to consider other potential risks like um, bias in the AI system, the possibility of the data being misused, even the potential for harm if the AI makes a wrong
Yeah.
diagnosis.
Okay, so you've got these scores for benefits and risks. What happens next?
You got to compare them, right? Ideally, the benefits are going to outweigh the risks. But if those risks are just too high, you have to find ways to reduce them, mitigate them.
Right, like anonymizing the data or giving people a way to opt out so their info isn't used. We talked about those strategies before, but are there any other options?
Oh, there are tons. The IAF report lists a whole bunch of mitigation strategies. For example, you could look into some of those privacy-enhancing technologies that let you train the AI without exposing sensitive data. Or you could set up some clear procedures for handling complaints, maybe give individuals more control over their data.
So even if a company does everything right, anonymizes data, gets consent, puts those safeguards in place, there's still a chance something could go wrong. I mean, no technology is perfect, right?
That's true, and the IAF acknowledges that. They're very clear that there's always some risk with AI development. But the goal is to minimize it. Do everything you can to be responsible, to be transparent.
And it sounds like this whole assessment process, it's not just a one-time thing. You have to keep reevaluating as the AI changes, as the technology develops.
Exactly. It's got to be ongoing. You constantly learn, adapt, and refine how you approach AI ethics. It's not just checking boxes. It's about baking ethical considerations into every step of development.
So for our listeners out there, here's the bottom line. AI is not going anywhere. It has the potential to really change our lives in amazing ways.
Mm.
But we can't just sit back and watch it happen. We have to stay informed, get involved, and hold these companies accountable for using AI responsibly.
Yeah, you said it. The IAF's framework, it's a tool for all of us. It reminds us that AI ethics isn't just some abstract idea. It's something that needs to be part of how we develop and use these powerful technologies.
It's about making sure AI benefits everyone while respecting individual rights and minimizing any potential harm. It's a tough challenge, but it's one we have to face. And that wraps up our deep dive into the world of AI and data protection. We hope you found it useful and thought-provoking.
We always encourage you to keep learning, dive into the IAF report yourself, and keep the conversation going. Until next time.